You know that feeling when an idea grabs you and just won't let go? That was me with these floral jeans. After seeing versions of them everywhere, especially on Pinterest, I finally decided to grab a couple of thrifted jeans and make it happen. Let me show you how it all came together. For this tutorial, I used two pairs of jeans, one in my size with a relaxed fit and a larger men's pair to make the flowers. Men's jeans are ideal for this because you have a better chance of finding ones with no stretch and they are looser than women's, so you'll have more fabric to work with. I also used a yard of quilting cotton in a matching shade to line the petals and help reduce bulk. Here's everything else I used. You can find the free petal pattern linked down in the description. If you're planning to follow along, you might be wondering, how many petals do I need? Well, that really depends on how detailed you want to get. You could go all in like I did, or you could just add a few flowers here and there for a simpler version. Each flower uses 5 petals, so I just estimated how many flowers I needed based on the size of my pants and the petal pattern. Originally, I made 120 petals for 24 flowers, but I ended up only using 90 petals or 18 flowers total. If you're going for a simpler version, start with 3 to 5 flowers and add more if needed. I'm going to quickly show you how I prep the oversized pants for the petals. I started by undoing the pants hem and the inseam and gave them a nice press afterwards. The side seams I cut open instead because I wasn't going to get much out of them anyways. I wanted to try and use up as much of the fabric as possible, and you can see on the edges here that it opened up a good 1.5 inches. Next, I match and pin the back leg pieces together along the edge so I can cut 2 petals at once. I made the petal pattern with a 1/4 inch seam allowance and drew it on thick cardstock so it could hold up to repeated use. I also cut a few extras just in case and to help me play around with the petal layout before tracing. After finalizing the layout, I traced the petals using a pen for cleaner, more accurate lines. I did end up getting 60 petals from each pant leg, which gave me the 120 I was aiming for. Before cutting them out, I added a pin to the center of each petal to keep the fabric from shifting. To cut the lining, I folded the fabric in half and traced another 60 petals. As you can see, planning the layout was a lot easier this time around. Quick cutting tip: cut a row of petals from the main fabric at a time to make it easier to maneuver without flipping the whole fabric around. With all the pattern pieces cut and ready to go, it was time to finish the petals. I placed the lining on top of each petal, right sides facing, and pinned them together. And of course, I did this for all 120 petals. To sew the petals, I started at the base and worked my way around to the other side. I left the base open so I could turn them right side out. The petals include a 1/4 inch allowance, so I stitched a 1/4 inch from the edge. To save time and thread, I stitched all the petals one after another in a continuous line without cutting the thread in between each one. This technique is actually called chain piecing and is commonly used by quilters. Next, I separated the petals by clipping the threads in between them. Then I trimmed the seam allowance just around the point to reduce the bulk before turning them right side out. After that, I used the tip of my scissors to carefully push out the points. I also pressed each petal flat and cleaned up any loose threads along the base. To give the petals that 3D effect, I pinched the inside about a 1/2 inch from the edge and folded it inwards towards the center. You can press or pin the folds to hold them in place. I chose to freehand it, folding and sewing each petal as I went along. And if you noticed, I used the same chain piecing technique here as well. This time, I separated the petals into sets of 5, one set for each flower, to make assembly easier. Before we get into assembling the flowers, there's one more step I'd like to cover, and that is the flower center. For that, I used a covered button kit Turns out the denim fabric was too thick to use, and the lining fabric was too thin because the metal kept showing through. Luckily, I found a lighter blue fabric that was just right. It gave a nice contrast to the flowers, and it had a similar shade to the jeans I'm using. The kit comes with instructions, so I'm just gonna do a quick run through showing you how I made them. It includes two types of button backs. I used the one that has a shank, so I could easily sew it in the center of each flower. Now that all the parts are prepped, it's time to finally assemble the flowers. To start assembling the flowers, I grabbed my press mat, a pair of scissors, some pins, a needle and thread, and of course a set of petals. I began by fanning out the petals in a star shape. I placed the top petal in the center first, then added the two side petals, overlapping them at the base. As I arranged each one, I pinned them directly to the press mat to keep everything in place. Once I was happy with the layout, I pinned the overlap base together to hold the shape. I basted them together using a quick running stitch around the base to secure them. I'm using white thread here so it's easier to see on camera. When doing this, I made sure not to sew too far from the edge. That way, the running stitch will be hidden underneath the button later on. With the flowers complete, we can start placing and attaching them to the jeans. I went in with an open mind, not really sure of the final layout. I just knew I wanted to start with the first flower centered, right below the pocket. From there, I decided to place the others in staggered rows with two flowers side by side, as close as possible so there will be very little space between them. As I played around with the placement, a few of the petals started to hang off the edge, so I wrapped them around the leg onto the back, and I actually really liked how it looked, so I went with that. Once I had the layout figured out, I pinned a few flowers at a time and worked in sections. It was more manageable that way, especially working around the pins. You could also use a temporary fabric adhesive or basting glue for this step, but I stuck with the pins so I could easily move things around if I wanted to. I then started hand sewing the flowers on one by one. I actually did a test run and sewed a few flowers ahead of time just so I could figure out the best way to attach them. For this, I grabbed scissors, pins, needle and thread, and a piece of cardboard. I'll explain what that's for later. I began right next to another flower so that once I made my way around, I could easily jump to the next flower and keep going. I went with an invisible stitch, specifically the ladder stitch. Using a single thread with one end knotted, I brought the needle up from behind the petal to hide it. From there, I inserted the needle into the edge of the petal, then brought the needle back out, roughly a 1/4 inch above. I then did the same thing on the other side, inserting the needle into the jeans and back out another 1/4 inch above. And you'll just keep repeating these steps. To recap, here's a quick close-up. I bring the needle up behind the petal. The side is fine too. Next, I sew into the edge of the petal, then back into the jeans, repeating that process to create the ladder stitch. I won't lie, this part took me a while to finish. I just chipped away at it whenever I had time, like watching my favorite shows. Again, you could always try it on a smaller scale. After every few stitches, I pull the thread tight before moving on. Now remember that piece of cardboard I mentioned earlier? Well, I placed it inside the pant leg, behind those hard to reach areas when sewing. It helped me avoid accidentally stitching through both layers of the denim. Now for the final touch, attaching the flower centers to bring the flowers to life. I doubled my thread this time for extra strength and used a matching color with the end knotted. At first, I thought it'd be as simple as sewing the button right in the middle of each flower, But it turned out to be trickier than I expected. The size of the button and the overlapping petals made the center hard to reach. Because of that, the buttons didn't feel as secure as I hoped, so I had to rethink my plan for sewing them on. So what I did was, I started by sewing them on like regular shank buttons just to hold them in place. Then I figured, well, since they are fabric buttons, I'll sew around the edge to anchor them. I basically went around the edge of the button using the ladder stitch as well. And with that, it was finally done. Here's how it turned out. So was it all worth it? I'd say the results speak for themselves. And honestly, I'd do it again, maybe on a smaller scale next time. Let me know in the comments, would you try this? Also, if you love turning old clothes into something new, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell because I've got more upcycled fashion coming your way. Before I go, I just want to leave you with this. You can do anything you set your mind to. It may take time, but try to enjoy the process and trust your creativity. This project reminded me that if you believe it, you can achieve it. Take care until next time.